The New York Rangers are currently on the outside looking in of a wild card spot currently in the Eastern Conference, but the good news is, of course, the East this season, both on the Metro and Atlantic side of things, has been really tight. There aren't really too many teams kind of, really distancing themselves from the rest of the pack. The Carolina Hurricanes are slowly starting to do that, but other than that, in the entire Eastern Conference, in the Atlantic Division and the Metro, there's not really any teams, really creating a massive gap there. Things right now are very tight in the East. The Rangers are only, a couple points back of a potential wild card spot. They're not too far back. They do have some more games played than certain teams, but the point is, they're not without kind of reach of possibly getting into a wild card or playoff spot. At this point, of course, we're about a quarter of the way through the season, but this Rangers team definitely has shown us, as Rangers fans, that they're by no means perfect, and they definitely have some major flaws. Of course, we know offensively, this team has had some big struggles at moments during games. They have been quite good at creating a lot of chances. They did so kind of more of that a little earlier on in the season there, where they were constantly, it felt like, kind of, outplaying and kind of out creating the other team there, where they just were coming out, on the bottom there. They weren't ended up winning those games there because they just couldn't find the back of the net, even though they were getting some pretty great goaltending and defensive play for the most part. Whereas now it kind of feels like we're back to kind of relying more so on the goaltending, and I think the defense has been solid, has taken a bit of a step back from where they were at earlier, but I still think the defense and goaltending is the kind of, better part of this team, whereas the offense, although I think is loaded with a lot of talent, of course, with guys like Panarin, JT Miller, Lafreniere, Cooley, Trocheck, Zibanejad, there are a lot of great offensive pieces, but I think so far this season, they've definitely been, for the most part, quite underwhelming. This team has not been creating nearly enough offense. And of course, last season, we saw this team have some pretty major problems defensively, whereas now they've kind of fixed that. And offensively last season, they weren't perfect. They weren't one of the absolute kind of top teams, but they definitely were not nearly as bad as this season around, where, I was definitely hoping this team, offensively would be at least about league average. I never thought they'd be, one of the true kind of top offenses in the entire NHL, but they should definitely be a lot closer to league average than where they're at right now, right near the bottom. So I think if they can kind of figure out this offense a bit here, I definitely think this Rangers team is going to be in the playoffs, but that's kind of the big question. Can they actually turn this offense around? Because currently, we're seeing a star player like Panarin, who is in a contract year, who's, of course, looking to get paid. He wants to sign some, I'm assuming, 3-year deal with a cap hit of, at least about 11-12 million per season. But with the way he's playing right now, it's probably not going to happen. I mean, unless a team really gets desperate or, can't find any other options, maybe they still do give him that, 3-year deal at 12 mil per season possibly. But honestly, with the way he's playing right now, I definitely would stay clear of that kind of a deal with Panarin, with, where he's at right now in his career age-wise, and of course, just with the way he's been playing this season. Also, you got to factor in what he kind of, doesn't do in playoffs with this team. Of course, how good he's been in the regular season compared to playoffs. It's definitely been a pretty big drop-off at moments. So to me right now, I am absolutely not paying him that big new deal that he seems to want, and especially if he plays like this for the rest of the season, it's going to be tough for him to get that deal from another team as well, possibly. So I think right now, you have a guy like Panarin in a contract year. He's not playing good at all. You've got a guy like JT Miller, the captain, who's supposed to be a guy who's really leading this team, can lead by example on the ice, and, is supposed to play with that energy and that physicality and that toughness and, never giving up out there. Well, he definitely did that the other night where, he might not have been able to kind of just back check real hard and, skate up to the guy there and catch him and actually, get the puck off him. But he could have at least given a little more effort there. I think that's kind of the big problem right now we're seeing with this team is at moments, it just feels like they're not giving enough effort. And especially when you see that your captain, who just got named captain this past offseason, who's supposed to be a guy who can really kind of energize and lead this team by example, it really is awful to see. So I think right now, offensively, this team has some major problems and major questions, but if they can figure some of them out, I do think this team could be in a pretty good spot because I think this defense is legit. I'm not saying it's going to be, guaranteed top 5 for the entire season, for example, not going to be, maybe not that good for the entire year, but I think this team defensively should definitely be in the top 10 at least of the league. I mean, it isn't a bad defense core at all. I think they made some really good changes. Adding in a guy like Gavrikov was a huge help, and you're getting some pretty solid goaltending. I mean, a guy like Igor, I don't think hasn't been playing as good as he was earlier on this season, but he's still been solid for the most part. Although is kind of allowing, I feel like, kind of 1 or 2 kind of goals each game where he'd probably like to have back, but he's still making a lot of those big saves. He's still, one of the better goalies, of course, in the league this season, just not quite playing at that true kind of Vezina level that we did really see, I think, earlier on, but he's still been good. You've got a guy like Quick as the backup who I think has been pretty incredible. I mean, for an almost 40-year-old backup goalie, I don't think you can expect really anything more. I mean, he has been lights out for the most part there. Just been a really good goalie just in general. Not just a good backup, just a good goalie this season when he's been in the net there. So I think that's a big positive. You got 2, goalies that you can definitely trust and are quite good. And the coaching staff, of course, I do think, I know as of late, some people have definitely started to criticize Mike Sullivan quite a bit. And I get that. We've seen a lot of kind of line changes happen and stuff like that, and they're trying to get the offense going. But to be honest, I don't really think the coaching staff has done a bad job. I think defensively, they've clearly done a really good job and a much better job than the previous coaching staff did last season, where, defensively, this team was having some major problems. And, I know we did add in a guy like, Gavrikov, but I do think the coaching staff has had a pretty good impact on this team defensively. And offensively, Mike Sullivan's teams have been kind of known to create kind of more chances, I guess, analytically than maybe they actually kind of produce. But I do think, the coaching staff overall, I don't think is to blame. I don't think we should be kind of looking to fire Mike Sullivan. I mean, the main kind of core players here, you still got the guys like Zibanejad, Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere, Cooley that we've had for a couple years now. Less so Cooley, of course, but the rest of those guys there, have been in the mix for a while now. So I don't really think you can really push all that blame onto a guy like Mike Sullivan and say he's the reason kind of why this offense isn't clicking when we're seeing, guys like Panarin and, of course, JT Miller. It just seems like take some shifts off and they're just not playing near their own level. I mean, you have to expect a lot more out of a guy like Panarin. I mean, if I'm coaching Panarin, I almost still kind of expect more than what he's doing right now, of course. I mean, at the end of the day, the players have to go out there and perform, and I just don't think we're getting enough out of those guys who are making top dollar, who are supposed to be leading this team offensively. Coaches can do a lot of good, of course, but Panarin still has to go out there and produce. He has to go out there and score and make that pass. And I just don't think they're doing a good enough job themselves with what I'm seeing. And I'm sure some other fans would agree with me as well because, these are guys who are supposed to be real superstars and they're just not playing like that at all. It's not like Panarin has just kind of taken a bit of a step back. It feels like he's kind of taken a pretty big step back. So I don't really think that's on, the coaching staff. I think that's more so on the player. There were, of course, guys like, JT Miller and Panarin that dealt with some injuries throughout, preseason and training camp, which I think, probably have had some kind of a factor. But at the end of the day, if they're not healthy, can they just not take a week or two off? I mean, I know you kind of felt like we've had these issues with players on the Rangers and past seasons, of course, kind of, playing when they're not at 100%. Maybe a guy like Kreider did that at moments last season, but it's just one of those things where, if they are actually injured right now and they're not at 100%, I would rather just see them get a game or two off there. Throw a guy like Brodzinski or Parson in that spot, whatever. If it has to be like that for a game or two and you slide some other guys up, that's fine. Get them healthy because come playoff time, if they're not at 100% there, this team is not going to do much at all. I mean, we already don't have this team, playing at a great level offensively. And if you somehow squeak into playoffs there and you have guys like JT Miller and Panarin not at 100%, well, this team's going to be in a pretty rough spot. So I think that's where, of course, we need to see this team, figure things out offensively. And it's going to be tough to make playoffs if they don't. But I think with the way this team kind of is structured defensively, and they've added in some good toughness, I think, since the last time they made it to the playoffs there. We didn't have a guy like, of course, Sam Carrick. We didn't have, this level of a guy like Will Cooley, although he wasn't playing absolutely incredible, maybe not as good as last season. He still is, of course, taking a pretty big step up from his first time making the playoffs as a rookie when he was in more of a fourth-line role. We added in a guy like Borgen and Gavrikov and Soucy now, who I all think are pretty nice adds compared to guys like Keandre Miller and Jacob Trouba and Ryan Lindgren, come playoff time. I'd rather this kind of three than that three. So I think this team has made some good changes since the last time they were in the playoffs there. I think, you got that multi-time Stanley Cup winning, coach there, Mike Sullivan, with, I think, a pretty good kind of crew of assistants there. Joe Sacco, he was interviewing for some head coaching jobs, or at least with the Bruins there for theirs, I believe. Then you've got a guy like David Quinn, of course, a former multi-time, NHL head coach there with the Rangers and Sharks. So I think you got a good coaching crew there. You've got some good goaltending for the most part. And when Igor's on his game, he is like the best goalie in the entire NHL. You've got a great defense core, I think, that has been much improved from last season. And also, you've got a, I think, pretty talented forward core with some decent depth. I mean, the depth isn't amazing talent-wise, but they've got some solid kind of depth to fill in kind of bottom six roles. But I think, obviously, the top guys right now are kind of the biggest problem with this team offensively, as they're just not producing at a good enough level. And that is the reason why, of course, I think this team, for the most part, is currently on the outside looking in of a wild card and top 3 spot in the Metropolitan Division. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching today's video. If you have enjoyed, definitely don't forget to click that like and subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content, as I do post a video about the New York Rangers every single day at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And also, definitely don't forget to comment down below your thoughts on today's video and on how you think the Rangers are playing as of late. What do you think needs to change there? Do you think the biggest problem, like I kind of am thinking, is, of course, the offense with players like, JT Miller and Panarin not producing at a good enough level? Let me know your thoughts. I'll catch you in the next one, and let's go Rangers.